live from Connecticut's newsroom. Now, the news at 11.
Trees uprooted, a barn in shambles, and debris scattered across the northeast corner of the state as a possible tornado blows through. Good evening, I'm Brent Harden.
And I'm Allison Morris. Fast and furious. That's how residents in the path of the possible twister are describing it.
Now, tomorrow, a National Weather Survey team will investigate damage in Tolland and in the Andover Coventry Stores area. Here's some video from a viewer who spotted the funnel clouds in stores. If today's winds were indeed a tornado, it would be the fourth one this month. 3 others were confirmed during a series of storms 10 days ago. Fox Connecticut meteorologist Rachel Frank joins us in the Weather Center now with more. And Rach, what do you think?
I think when you've got the video like that and damage to go along with it, it's almost a pretty easy call. Typically, you won't hear me say something like that, but I would say that is very likely a tornado that touched down. In fact, it may have even touched down twice today. And there's 2 areas that the National Weather Service, as you mentioned, that they're going to be investigating. And the first area is right around Tolland with a storm that ended up really kind of exploding between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, heading towards the Ashford area and Woodstock before losing a lot of its rotation. And then a secondary storm that developed around Andover, moving towards Coventry and Mansfield. And we did see a few trees down in the Tolland area. Also in Coventry, a barn was knocked down and also a tree was uprooted. Mansfield reporting trees and wires down as well as that storm moved through. And you saw not just rotation on Doppler radar, but also rotation very visible from the video that I just showed you a moment ago. And that rotation ended up weakening as the storm moved into Chaplin. Right now, I can show you there is nothing going on across Connecticut. We do have scattered strong storms to the west. That's actually a cold front that's going to help wash at least some of the moisture out of the air and bring us a little bit of relief from this steamy air mass. As far as showers and storms go tonight, we're not done yet. We'll see a few around, but I don't think they'll pack the same punch that we had around today. In fact, I'm almost positive of it, but we'll still see a widely scattered shower or a downpour in spots. And then tomorrow, more scattered storms, and then we'll start to quiet the weather pattern down, at least for a little while. I'll explain full forecast, including that 7-day coming up in just a bit, guys.
All right, Rachel, thank you. No matter what the National Weather Service team says, homeowners and business owners say they know what caused the damage in Coventry.
They believe a tornado caused a massive path of destruction through the center of town. A barn was leveled in the 400 block of Main Street, and that is where we find Fox Connecticut's Lori Perez tonight.
Brent and Allison, this is one of the most extraordinary sights that we have seen today. You can see there is just a load of trees, layer after layer of trees that have toppled down in this home along Main Street here in Coventry. Amazingly, they did not fall on the house at all, and they also didn't pull down any of the power lines that extend from the street to the home, so the power is still on in this house. Residents and neighbors around here say the National Weather Service might be heading this way to make their determination, but locals have already decided what came through here.
I saw the funnel cloud and the metal panels from this barn were just being pulled up into the air, probably 2,000 feet.
Neighbors in Coventry are swapping storm stories already. Local roads now the worst kind of scenic drives, with barns leveled, trees torn up and dropped everywhere, forest lines left with the stubble of a bad shave. In the moments after Wednesday's storm, residents couldn't help but think of the seconds before it.
I was on the phone, and it was pretty clear instantly that something was happening.
A summer tantrum that came in like a lamb and left like a lion. An angry lion tearing everything in its path to shreds.
I got up and I walked out my front door. I heard kind of a boom. It wasn't like thunder, and then it was like a freight train.
Mother Nature's alarm signaling something big and bad was coming. This home on Main Street was left swaddled in damage. The homeowner, too shaken up to go on camera, tells us it went down one side of her home, around the back, and up the other side. One of lots of stories we heard of close calls.
Just like you hear about, the path of a tornado is narrow. I mean, my driveway is on the other side of those trees.
And there's no damage?
There's nothing. Yeah. I have outdoor plants. They didn't even fall over.
A weather event, part fascinating, part interesting, and all sorts of scary for many wondering what's going on with the weather.
You can't help but. I mean, wintertime, we had all that snow and then the rain, and now the tornadoes.
There's damage like this to see all over Coventry, probably all around Tolland and Windham counties. And I know people want to get out and take a look at what the storm left behind, but you do have to remember that you have to be extraordinarily careful during a time like this because there are emergency crews, power crews out on the roads trying to get people back to safety. In Coventry, I'm Lori Perez, Fox Connecticut News.
Facing more than 24 survivors of the brutal attack he's accused of carrying out, Boston bombing suspect Johar Tsarnaev appeared in federal court in Boston today.
In his first public appearance since his arrest, the 19-year-old denied all charges against him. Tsarnaev faces 30 federal criminal charges, including the use of a weapon of mass destruction. 17 charges carried the death penalty. 3 people were killed, more than 260 wounded, when a pair of homemade bombs went off at the finish line of the Boston Marathon in April. About 30 of the surviving victims were in court today and say Tsarnaev looked back at them before entering his not guilty plea.
Thought that maybe he would come in with a different attitude, or maybe look a little different, maybe look like he cared a little bit, but he didn't show me that. He never looked at us. He never turned in our direction. We were sitting directly behind him.
Tsarnaev's also charged with killing Sean Collier, a police officer at MIT. That happened during a getaway attempt with his older brother Tamerlan, who later died in a gun battle with police. MIT police officers lined up outside the courthouse in a show of solidarity with their fallen comrade.
Also outside the courthouse, Tsarnaev's family avoided news cameras. Some supporters who claim he is innocent actually cheered as he arrived in a police van. Victims call it salt in an open wound.
Kind of disturbed by some of, I guess, his supporters with the apparel they had on, their T-shirts. One had a gun on it, others, he's not guilty.
Tsarnaev will appear in court again in September. A trial date has not yet been set, but when it is, prosecutors expect 80 to 100 witnesses will take the stand. The marathon bombings and learning how to avoid another attack was the focus of a Senate hearing today in Washington.
Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis told lawmakers there's a disconnect between state and federal law enforcement agencies.
There's limited access to federal systems. And that's where the rub is. There is people, names can fall through the cracks here the way it's set up.
Senator Kelly Ayotte of New Hampshire echoed Davis's concern, saying a lack of information also puts law enforcement officers in harm's way. Suspects involved in the murder case against Bristol native and former NFLer Aaron Hernandez are beginning to give each other up.
Yeah, a warrant reveals one of the Bristol men facing gun charges in connection with the murder of Odin Lloyd says it was Hernandez who fired the fatal shots in an industrial park a half-mile from his North Attleboro home. Carlos Ortiz says he fell asleep in the back of the car carrying Hernandez, Lloyd, and the third suspect, Ernest Wallace. He says he awoke when he saw the 3 men get out of the car and heard gunshots, and that Wallace and Hernandez were the only ones to return. Ortiz says he didn't see who fired the shots, but that Wallace told him Hernandez admitted to killing Lloyd. All 3 men remain behind bars. Wallace is charged with accessory to murder. Police say Hernandez orchestrated the execution-style murder in retaliation for evidence Lloyd had against him in a double homicide from 2012.
We're also getting our first look inside Hernandez's North Attleboro home just hours after Lloyd was killed. Authorities released these still images taken from surveillance video. Hernandez has an elaborate surveillance system with 14 cameras inside and outside his home. Police say the images show Hernandez in a white hoodie with 2 other people. And for the latest developments in the case against Aaron Hernandez, log on to foxct.com.
A man from Bridgeport accused of killing a homeless man and then eating his body parts is not guilty by reason of insanity. A 3-judge panel made their decision yesterday. Prosecutors say Tyree Smith bludgeoned Angel Gonzalez with an axe and then ate his eyeball and part of his brain. He's been behind bars since police arrested him last year in Florida. The same 3-judge panel that rendered the not guilty verdict will meet again in September to decide if Smith should be committed to a mental hospital. Hartford police still looking for the gunman who shot a man dead in the parking lot of Jamoki Academy at Milner School this morning. About 100 kids were attending a camp at the school on Vine Street, but police say they didn't witness the shooting and they were not in danger. The 25-year-old man was pronounced dead at the hospital just after 10.
Governor Dannel Malloy joined a chorus of outrage voices today, speaking out against KKK flyers found in Milford neighborhoods. Joined by civil rights advocates and members of the clergy, Malloy declared that the Klan has no place in Connecticut. Earlier this week, flyers were left on doorsteps in 2 sections of Milford, advertising a neighborhood watch run by the United Klans of America.
This was shocking. This was a bit disturbing.
We've informed this organization that either they or their surrogates need to stop leaving these flyers on the private property of our Milford residents.
Milford police say Klansmen are not authorized to run any kind of legitimate neighborhood watch in the city. A warning for residents in Newington tonight. Telephone scammers are trying to collect donations for a so-called police canine program. Police say the whole thing is bogus and anyone contacted by the solicitors should call their department.
Repairing a partial ceiling collapse at McDonough Expeditionary Learning School in Hartford is expected to cost about $80,000. A part of the ceiling in a second-story classroom and light fixture fell back in June while class was in session. A teaching intern and 13-year-old student suffered minor injuries. The school district has decided to replace 4 classroom ceilings, including the one that collapsed. Work should be wrapped up before students return in August.
The plans to turn Old Weathersfield into a big tourist destination. A look at the proposals city leaders have to revitalize the town. I'm Crystal Hall. That story is next.
And doing more with less. Lots of businesses doing just that these days. But what about the ones that are in charge of the safety of your children? That's next at 11.
And what is your decision, sir?
After consulting with counsel, not to testify, Your Honor.
A neighborhood watchman decides not to tell his side of the story, and his fate could be in the hands of a jury within hours. We head to the Florida courtroom ahead at 11.
And what is your decision, sir?
After consulting with counsel, not to testify, Your Honor.
Classic New England charm is hard to miss in Old Weathersfield, and town leaders want to make sure it never disappears.
Now, that's why they held a public meeting tonight to discuss plans they have for preserving the town. Fox Connecticut's Crystal Hall was there, and she joins us now with more. Crystal.
Well, Brent and Allison, through a $50,000 grant, town leaders allowed outside sources to look into how Old Weathersfield can preserve its character. That plan includes some major revitalization and support from property owners.
There's a lot of charm in Old Weathersfield.
Comstock Ferry is one of the oldest continuously operated seed houses in North America.
And Comstock Ferry contributes to part of it.
We've been doing business since 1811.
The historic building has served as a vibrant seed house. It's one of 3 places the town of Weathersfield is looking to restore. It's the most ambitious proposal and would make it part museum and part seed house. But next door, the Belden House, and next door to that, the Masonic Hall, are also part of the city's plans to revitalize Old Weathersfield.
We're trying to be proactive and come up with some ideas as to how to reuse the historic properties rather than, reconstruct and demolish them.
Proposals would turn the empty Masonic Hall into retail, food, even performance space similar to Boston's Faneuil Hall. The Belden House would turn into specialty retail, residential, and perhaps even move the historic structure to Church Street. Something that doesn't sit well with the owner and something that city leaders say won't likely happen.
We live in town and we just want to know what they're doing.
Mira Schlane was one of dozens who came to tonight's meeting to listen to the plans that some say sounds good, but may not actually come to fruition.
The concept sounds like a good idea in theory, but in practicality, you're dealing with privately owned homes.
That's why the meeting was just for public input. Next, city leaders will decide where to go from here. Transform these historic places into something more keen to the eye, or keep them as is.
The town planner says they are still unsure of how everything would be funded. They are looking at grants and tax incentives and any other assistance they might be able to receive because they do expect it to cost a few $1 million. Crystal Hall, Fox Connecticut.
Thank you, Crystal. Although it could be the busiest summer ever at swimming areas across Connecticut, adding extra lifeguards is not in the plans. In fact, more than half of the designated swim areas at state parks have no lifeguards, even at places with a history of drownings. DEEP says guards are only on duty at beaches that draw the biggest crowds or have dangerous waves and currents like along the coast. Since 2000, there have been 32 drownings at state parks, most recently at Hopeville Pond in Griswold, where a 16-year-old drowned on the 4th of July.
Pretty incredible time lapse taken from right here on top of Connecticut's newsroom. And just when you think it looks really dark and stormy, wait just a few seconds more. You can barely see anything through the raindrops, through the heavy rain in the middle of next week. And this is also, we're watching tornadoes on the 24th anniversary of the Hamden tornado, which I know some of you remember. It was F4 damage. Back then we didn't have the EF scale, but really crazy. I mean, it just leveled towns.
Thankful that we didn't see anything nearly that bad today.
This is a minor tornado compared to that, but of course, wishing everybody the best who's cleaning up.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rach. Up next, the Zimmerman defense rests without the testimony of its biggest witness. What's next for the Neighborhood Watchman?
And a stalemate in Congress sends student loan rates soaring at the start of the month, but is there an end in sight where lawmakers stand now?
And what is your decision, sir?
After consulting with counsel, not to testify, Your Honor.
George Zimmerman's fate could be in the hands of the jury by the end of the week. Closing arguments in the second-degree murder trial begin tomorrow morning.
Yeah, the defense team rested its case this afternoon without making the Neighborhood Watchman take the stand. Zimmerman's father was the last witness to take the stand, saying he listened to the 911 tape recorded during the fatal altercation between Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin and said it was his son screaming for help. Zimmerman maintains he fatally shot the 17-year-old in self-defense. The defense team also asked a prosecution witness to reenact the confrontation that ended in Martin's death, straddling and bashing a mannequin's head against the floor as stunned jurors looked on.
Were the injuries on Mr. Zimmerman's back of his head consistent with someone doing this on cement?
The judge dealt 2 defeats to the defense today, ruling a computer animation depicting Martin as the aggressor cannot be shown as evidence. The defense also won't be able to show jurors text messages about fighting and camera phone photos of marijuana plants and a handgun found in Trayvon Martin's phone. 2 old partners in crime collided in the trial of reputed mobster James Whitey Bulger today.
Bulger and his former associate Kevin Weeks shouted at each other from across the courtroom in Boston. Weeks, a prosecution witness, cut a deal with the feds, serving 5 years for aiding and abetting in 5 murders, several of which Weeks said he witnessed Bulger commit. When asked on the stand whether it bothered him that 5 people died, Weeks shot back, quote, "We killed people that were rats." Bulger's charged in the deaths of 19 people and also faces extortion, racketeering, and money laundering charges.
The crew of Asiana Flight 214 that crashed in San Francisco on Saturday briefly addressed the public today. One of the flight attendants broke her tailbone when the jet clipped a seawall and then slammed into the runway. Another crew member was in a wheelchair. Speaking through an interpreter, they said they are working as hard as possible to recover. 2 people died in the crash and more than 100 were injured. The NTSB is investigating. One focus has been whether automatic controls in the cockpit were working. And even if they weren't, questions have been raised about whether the pilots recognized that something was wrong quickly enough and did the right thing to fix it.
The engineer of the runaway train that plowed into a small Quebec town has been suspended without pay and is being criminally investigated by Canadian authorities. The engineer worked for the Montreal, Maine and Atlantic Railway for years and until Saturday had a clear safety record. He told investigators he set 11 handbrakes on the train's cars before they broke away and exploded, but the head of the railway questions that claim.
This was a failure of the brakes. It's very questionable whether the brakes, the hand brakes, were properly applied on this train. As a matter of fact, I'll say they weren't, or else we wouldn't have had this incident.
Police have not commented on the allegations. At least 15 people were killed and 45 are still missing after 72 cars hauling oil derailed and exploded in the center of Lac-Mégantic last weekend. A major setback for students today as the Senate failed to pass a plan that would have reversed the doubling of the student loan interest rates.
Now, the Democratic bill would have temporarily held rates on subsidized Stafford loans at 3.4% for a year. The measure fell 9 votes short of advancing with the tally split along party lines. Rates doubled to 6.8% on July 1st for future borrowers. Nelson Mandela remains in critical but stable condition, but is responding to treatment. That's according to South African President Jacob Zuma, who visited Mandela in the hospital today. The 94-year-old has been hospitalized since June 8th for a recurring lung infection. Mandela became an international figure after spending 27 years in prison for fighting racial segregation. He went on to become the nation's first black president in 1994. Former President George H.W. Bush is making a return to the White House. He'll be back on Monday to celebrate a milestone for a service initiative he started while in office. The 41st president recognized citizens who serve their communities with the Daily Point of Light Award. Monday, the 5,000th award will be given to a volunteer. The nonprofit, nonpartisan service organization is also now the largest in the world. Paying homage to a basketball great. What's in store in stores for Coach Jim Calhoun after this break.
A special treat for kids in Newtown this afternoon. The New Haven Open was in town, introducing the game of tennis to kids at the Newtown Parks and Rec Day Camp. The campers took an introductory tennis lesson, and the focus of the day, the importance of fitness and having fun.
Well, I hope they have a great time today, and by the looks of it, they are. But if one of these kids decides to sign up for tennis and takes up the game, it's all worthwhile.
The New Haven Open tournament director also introduced the field of players for next month's event, which includes 2 Wimbledon finalists.
Plans are in the works at UConn to pay tribute to former head coach Jim Calhoun later this year. An event at Gamble Pavilion in September will honor the Hall of Famer. According to the school's website, the event includes a wide range of speakers, including former Husky players from different eras of his career. Calhoun served as head coach from 1986 until last year. He won 3 national titles in that span.
Another top Connecticut high school football. That's sports in 61 seconds. The Mets were also winners. I'm Rich Capole. Allison.
Thank you, Rich.
You bet.
2 Democratic congresswomen are over the moon for this idea, the zany out-of-this-world proposal that could change history. Next.
If you believe there's nothing up their sleeve, then nothing is cool.
Yosemite, Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, the moon. 2 members of Congress are pitching an out-of-this-world idea to put a national park there.
Representatives Donna Edwards of Maryland and Eddie Bernice Johnson of Texas have proposed legislation that would establish a national historical park on the surface of the moon to mark where the Apollo missions landed between 1969 and 1972. Both congresswomen say they want to protect artifacts left by astronauts from future commercial development. The national park designation would only apply to the American flags and the lunar rover and other objects because the moon's surface, of course, does not belong to the U.S. or any other nation under an international treaty. So this is a very forward-looking piece of legislation, I think.
Yeah, I think
We're
so.
worried about 50 years from now when someone might want to mess with the lunar rover. Okay.
We're all delirious now.
It's been a long tornado-filled kind of day.
All right, and that's going to do it for us, thankfully. Thanks for joining us.
For all the latest news, weather, and traffic, tune in tomorrow morning at 4:30. Good night.